Alexander Park's footsteps echoed against the concrete path winding through Central Park, each stride purposeful and measured like the deals he closed daily. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, a gentle breeze, carrying the first hints of autumn. He loosened his Italian silk tie, allowing himself a rare moment of vulnerability after another brutal negotiation. The winter's group acquisition had been particularly challenging. 12 hours of relentless bargaining had left him mentally drained, yet somehow victorious. At 35, he'd built his reputation on being ruthlessly efficient, turning struggling companies into profit machines with surgical precision. People called him the corporate sculptor, a nickname he secretly despised but never corrected. It served its purpose, keeping competitors wary and partners in line. His phone buzzed again, probably Richard's with the final contract adjustments. Alexander ignored it, focusing instead on the serenity of the park. These solitary walks were his only concession to self-care, a habit he'd developed years ago, when the pressure of building his empire threatened to overwhelm him. A child's delighted squeal pierced the evening quiet, followed by the sound of running feet on gravel. Alexander's jaw tightened instinctively. He'd chosen this hour specifically to avoid the usual crowd of families and tourists. As he rounded the bend near Cherry Hill Fountain, he caught sight of a little girl no more than 7, chasing after a bright red balloon. "Sophie, wait!" A distant voice called out, but the child was already at the water's edge, reaching for the balloon that danced just out of reach. Everything that followed happened in slow motion. The girl's sneaker slipped on the wet rocks. Her small arms windmilled desperately as she tried to regain balance. Then, with a splash that seemed to echo across the entire park, she disappeared, beneath the dark water. Alexander didn't think. For the first time in 8 years, he acted purely on instinct. His expensive suit jacket hit the ground as he sprinted toward the lake. The water was shockingly cold as he dove in, his powerful strokes cutting through the murky depths. Training from his college swimming team kicked in automatically, one of the few remnants of his life before business consumed everything. He spotted her immediately, her yellow dress billowing like an underwater flower. Her eyes were closed, a thin trail of blood streaming from a gash on her forehead where she'd struck the rocks. Alexander's heart clenched as he wrapped an arm around her tiny waist, kicking hard toward the surface. They broke through with a gasping splash, Alexander immediately checking the girl's breathing. It was shallow but present. Relief flooded through him until a scream shattered his focus. "Sophie! Oh God, Sophie!" Alexander's world tilted on its axis. That voice. He knew that voice. It had haunted his dreams for 8 years, echoing through empty penthouses and lonely nights. He looked up, water streaming from his face, and time stopped. Mia Carter stood at the water's edge, her hands pressed against her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked exactly as he remembered. Wild copper hair, those impossibly green eyes, the splash of freckles across her nose that she'd always tried to hide. 8 years had only enhanced her beauty, adding a mature grace to her features that made his chest ache. "She's breathing," he managed to say, his voice rough as he waded toward the shore. "But she's hit her head. We need an ambulance." Mia seemed frozen, recognition dawning in her eyes as she stared at him. "Alexander?" He handed Sophie to the park security guard who had appeared beside Mia, then pulled himself out of the water. "She needs immediate medical attention. The cut looks deep." His clinical tone surprised even him, a defense mechanism kicking in to handle the surreal situation. Here was Mia, the woman whose absence had left a void he'd filled with work and ambition, and a child who'd nearly drowned. He couldn't process both at once. Mia snapped out of her shock, gathering Sophie into her arms as the security guard called for emergency services. "Baby, please wake up, please, sweetheart." Alexander watched, water pooling at his feet, as Mia pressed kisses to Sophie's pale face. The girl stirred slightly, letting out a weak cough. The relief on Mia's face was palpable, but the fear hadn't left her eyes. "The ambulance is 3 minutes out," the guard announced, keeping the gathering crowd at bay. Alexander found himself moving closer, drawn by some invisible force. "Mia, Don't," she cut him off, her voice trembling. "Please, I can't right now." He stepped back, feeling the familiar wall she'd always been able to throw up between them. 8 years ago, he'd walked away from that wall, convinced his ambitions were more important than breaking through it. Now, watching her clutch the injured child, he felt the weight of that decision, like a physical blow. The ambulance arrived. With a wail of sirens, paramedics quickly taking charge of the situation. Alexander stood back, his soaked clothes clinging uncomfortably, as they assessed Sophie's condition. The cut would need stitches, they said. Possible mild concussion. They wanted to take her to Mount Sinai for proper evaluation. "I'm riding with her," Mia declared, already climbing into the ambulance. Before the doors closed, she looked at Alexander one last time. In that brief moment, he saw everything: gratitude, fear, anger, and something else he couldn't quite name. Then she was gone, leaving him standing in the gathering darkness, dripping lake water onto the pavement. His phone buzzed again. Richards, with another urgent message about the Winters deal. Alexander stared at the screen, remembering how just an hour ago corporate acquisitions had seemed like the most important thing in his world. Now, all he could see was Sophie's pale face and Mia's haunted eyes. He typed a quick message to Richards. "Handle it." Then he was running to his car, not caring about the leather seats as he slid behind the wheel. He had to know if Sophie would be okay. He had to understand why fate had chosen today to bring Mia back into his life. As he navigated through Manhattan, traffic following the path the ambulance had taken, Alexander realized something had fundamentally shifted inside him. The man who'd walked into Central Park, controlled, calculating, convinced of his choices, had drowned in that lake. Who had emerged, he wasn't quite sure. But for the first time in 8 years, he felt truly awake. The Mount Sinai Hospital loomed ahead, its windows blazing against the darkening sky. Alexander parked haphazardly, leaving his keys with the valet. As he jogged through the emergency room doors, still soaking wet, he had no idea he was running toward more than just answers about Sophie's condition. He was running toward a truth that would shatter every carefully constructed wall he'd built around his heart. A truth that would force him to confront the real cost of his ambition 8 years ago. And somewhere in the sterile corridors ahead, Mia was holding that truth in her arms, knowing their carefully separated worlds were about to collide in ways neither of them could have imagined. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai's emergency department cast harsh shadows across Mia's face as she paced the corridor. Her clothes were still damp from holding Sophie, copper hair falling in messy waves around her shoulders. The steady beeping of monitors from nearby rooms counted the seconds like a metronome of anxiety. "Ms. Carter?" Dr. Regina Martinez emerged from Sophie's room, her expression carefully neutral. "We need to discuss your daughter's condition." Mia's heart clenched. She'd been preparing herself for this moment since they'd arrived, trying to focus on anything but the memory of Sophie's pale face and the blood-matted hair. "How bad is it?" "The head injury is our primary concern," Dr. Martinez explained, consulting her tablet. "The CT scan shows minor swelling. But what's more pressing is the blood loss. Sophie's hemoglobin levels are dropping faster than we'd like. We need to start a transfusion immediately." "Of course," Mia nodded quickly. "Whatever she needs, I'm her mother, I can—" "We've already checked your blood type from your previous donations, Ms. Carter." The doctor's pause carried weight. "Unfortunately, you're not a match for this particular transfusion. We need type A negative blood and you're B positive." The words hit Mia like a physical blow. She steadied herself against the wall, memories flooding back. The hospital form she'd filled out 8 years ago. The blood type listed under father on Sophie's birth certificate. Her carefully constructed world began to crack at the edges. "I can help." Alexander's voice came from behind her, still carrying that authoritative tone she remembered so well. He stood in the doorway, his expensive suit completely ruined, dark hair still damp from the lake. Despite everything, he looked impeccable, a man used to commanding any room he entered. Mia turned away, unable to face him. You don't even know your blood type. A negative. He stepped closer, his presence filling the narrow corridor. I've known since college. Regular physical requirements for the swim team. Dr. Martinez looked between them, sensing the tension. Mr. Park, Alexander Park. He pulled out his wallet, producing his driver's license. I can provide any documentation you need. We'll need to run a quick screening test, but if you're a match, we should proceed immediately. The doctor's efficiency was a sharp contrast to the emotional storm brewing in the hallway. I'll have a nurse draw your blood for testing. As Dr. Martinez walked away, the silence between Mia and Alexander grew thick with unspoken words. Through the room's window, they could see Sophie's small form on the hospital bed, monitors blinking steadily around her. Thank you, Mia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. For pulling her out. For offering to help now. But after the transfusion, you should go. Alexander moved to stand beside her, both of them watching Sophie through the glass. No, I can't do that, Mia. Not until I understand what's happening here. The way you're acting, there's something you're not telling me. Mia closed her eyes, feeling tears threatening to fall. 8 years of carefully guarded secrets pressed against her chest, demanding release. Before she could respond, a nurse approached with blood collection equipment. Mr. Park? We'll need to draw your blood now. Alexander nodded, rolling up his sleeve. As the nurse worked, his eyes never left Mia's face. Your daughter, Sophie. She's 7, isn't she? Mia's sharp intake of breath was answer enough. She watched as understanding began to dawn in his eyes, calculations running behind that brilliant business mind of his. 8 years ago, he continued, his voice growing tight, when you disappeared, when you stopped taking my calls and moved, without telling anyone where you'd gone. Were you... The nurse finished drawing blood and left them alone in the corridor. Mia wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of protection she'd developed years ago. Mr. Park? Dr. Martinez returned, her expression urgent. Your blood work is compatible. We need to start the transfusion now. Please come with me to complete the consent forms. Just a moment. Alexander's voice had lost its usual control. Mia, I need you to answer me. Sophie, is she... Yes, the word escaped like a prayer, like a confession, like a key unlocking a door that could never be closed again. She's yours, Alexander. Sophie is your daughter. The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. Alexander gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. All his business acumen, all his careful planning and control, meant nothing in the face of this revelation. Mr. Park, Dr. Martinez interrupted again, more firmly this time. I understand this is a lot to process, but your daughter needs that transfusion now. Your daughter. The words hung in the air between them. Alexander straightened, something shifting in his expression. Of course. Lead the way, doctor. As he followed Dr. Martinez, he paused beside Mia. This isn't over. We're going to talk about this. About everything. Mia watched him disappear down the corridor, then sank into a nearby chair, her legs no longer able to support her. The secret she'd carried for 8 years was out, exposed under harsh hospital lights and the urgency of Sophie's condition. While Alexander was prepped for the transfusion, Mia returned to Sophie's bedside. Her daughter stirred slightly as she took her small hand. Mommy. Sophie's voice was weak, her eyes struggling to focus. I'm here, baby. Mia smoothed Sophie's dark hair that matched Alexander's exactly. Everything's going to be okay. The doctors are going to help you feel better. The man, Sophie mumbled, fighting to stay awake. The one who pulled me out. He looked sad. Why was he sad, Mommy? Mia's throat tightened. Sometimes grown-ups get sad when children are hurt, sweetheart. But don't worry about that now. Just rest. Soon, nurses wheeled in the transfusion equipment. Mia watched as Alexander's blood began flowing through the tubes that would carry it to their daughter. Their daughter. The thought still seemed surreal. Alexander stood in the doorway, rolling down his sleeve after the donation, his eyes fixed on Sophie, really seeing her for the first time. Mia recognized the look on his face, the same one she'd had 8 years ago when she'd first held Sophie. The moment when your entire world shifts on its axis, reorganizing itself around a tiny human being. "She has your eyes," he said quietly, not looking away from Sophie. "I noticed at the lake, but I didn't understand what I was seeing." "And your smile," Mia admitted. "When she's really happy, she has your exact smile." Alexander's hand trembled slightly as he reached out to touch the doorframe, as if he needed the support. 8 years, Mia. You kept this from me for 8 years. You made your choice very clear back then, she replied, steel entering her voice. Your empire was more important than anything, than anyone. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to tell me I was going to be a father. His voice rose slightly, then immediately dropped as Sophie stirred. You had no right to make that decision for me. No right? Mia stood, anger finally breaking through her composure. You told me yourself that children were a distraction you couldn't afford, that they destroyed careers and ruined potential. Or have you forgotten that conversation? Alexander flinched as his own words came back to haunt him. I was different then. You know I was different. Yes, you were. And I couldn't risk Sophie being hurt by that version of you. Mia's voice cracked. She deserved better than a father, who saw her as an inconvenience to his ambitions. Before Alexander could respond, Dr. Martinez returned with updated test results. The transfusion is working, her levels are stabilizing, and the swelling in her brain is minimal. We'll keep her overnight for observation, but I'm optimistic about her recovery. The relief was palpable, but it did nothing to dissipate the tension between Mia and Alexander. They stood on opposite sides of Sophie's bed, united in their concern for her but divided by years of hurt and secrets. I'd like to run a paternity test, Alexander said suddenly. Not because I doubt you, he added quickly, seeing Mia's expression, but because I want it officially documented. I want my name on her birth certificate. I want legal recognition of my daughter. The word daughter still sounded foreign on his tongue, but he said it with determination. Mia recognized the look in his eyes, the same one he'd had when building his business empire. Alexander Park had just found a new purpose, and heaven help anyone who stood in his way. We'll discuss it tomorrow, Mia said firmly. Right now, Sophie needs rest, not a legal battle. Alexander nodded, but his expression made it clear. This was just the beginning. As night settled over Manhattan, 3 lives that had been separate for 8 years were now irrevocably intertwined, bound together by blood ties that ran deeper than hurt, stronger than pride, and more complex than either Mia or Alexander could have imagined. Dawn crept over Manhattan, painting the hospital room in soft golden light. Alexander hadn't left his post by the window, his suit jacket draped over a nearby chair, tie loosened. He'd spent the night watching Sophie sleep, memorizing every detail of her face, his daughter's face. The word still felt foreign in his mind. Daughter. He had a daughter. The thought crashed through his consciousness like waves, each time, hitting him with renewed force. His phone had been buzzing incessantly, Richard's board members, his executive assistant, all demanding attention for the winter's acquisition. He'd silenced them all with a single text. Personal emergency. Handle it. Sophie stirred slightly, her small hand clutching the hospital blanket. The morning light caught her features, and Alexander saw what Mia had mentioned, his own smile ghosting across her sleeping face. How had he not seen it immediately? The shape of her jaw, the slight furrow between her brows as she dreamed, all mirrors of his own features. You should go home and change. Mia's voice came from the doorway. She'd stepped out earlier to get coffee, and now stood watching him with guarded eyes. She'd changed into fresh clothes, probably brought by the friend she'd called last night. I'm not leaving. His voice was quiet but firm. Not until we talk about this. Really talk about it. Mia sighed, moving to check Sophie's temperature. With the back of her hand, a mother's instinct that Alexander watched with a mixture of admiration and envy. 8 years of these moments he'd missed. "There's nothing to discuss right now," Mia replied, though her tone had softened. "Sophie needs rest and I've hired a lawyer," Alexander cut in, turning to face her fully. "Lawrence Chen, the best family law attorney in New York." Mia's face hardened. "Of course you have. Not even 24 hours and you're already trying to solve this with money and legal power. That's not—" Alexander ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I'm not trying to fight you, Mia. I want to do this right. Legally, officially. I want my name on her birth certificate. I want shared custody. You want to control the situation," Mia finished for him. "Just like you always did. But Sophie isn't a business deal, Alexander. You can't just walk in after 8 years and demand—" "I didn't know." His voice rose slightly, then immediately dropped as Sophie shifted in her sleep. "I didn't know she existed. You never gave me the chance to—" "To what?" Mia challenged, though her own voice stayed low. "To reject her like you rejected everything else that didn't fit into your 10-year plan. Your words, remember? Children are anchors that drown ambition." The quote hit him like a physical blow. He remembered that conversation. A charity gala watching his mentor Robert Blackwell doting on his grandchildren. He'd been drunk on success and expensive scotch, laying out his vision for the future. No distractions, no complications, nothing to slow his meteoric rise to the top. I was wrong. The admission felt like gravel in his throat. I was young and stupid and wrong. You were 37, and still stupid. He moved closer, close enough to smell her familiar perfume. Vanilla and something floral, the same scent that had lingered in his memories for 8 years. "But I'm not that man anymore, Mia. Yesterday proved that." "Yesterday proved you can act on instinct in a crisis," she countered. "Being a father is different. It's every day, every moment, even when it's inconvenient. Even when it costs you something." Before he could respond, Sophie's monitors beeped as she began to wake. Both adults immediately turned their attention to her, their argument forgotten in the face of her needs. "Mommy?" Sophie's voice was stronger than last night, her eyes clearer. "I'm here, baby." Mia was instantly at her side, smoothing her hair. "How are you feeling?" "My head hurts." Sophie's gaze drifted to Alexander and his heart stopped at the direct contact. "You're the man from the lake." Alexander stepped forward, drawn by some instinct he didn't understand. "Yes, I am. My name is Alexander. You got all wet saving me." Sophie's observation was so innocently direct that it almost made him smile. "Your suit looks funny now." "Sophie," Mia intervened, "you should rest more. The doctor said—" "It's okay," Sophie assured her with a child's confidence. "My head just feels bumpy, like when I did a cartwheel inside and hit the coffee table." She looked at Alexander again. "Do you know how to do cartwheels?" The question caught him off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked him something so simple, so unrelated to business or power? "No, I never learned." "I can teach you," Sophie offered generously. When my head stops being bumpy, Alexander felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he'd built years ago beginning to crumble. "I'd like that." A nurse entered with breakfast and fresh vitals checks, creating a welcome break in the emotional tension. As she examined Sophie's stitches and checked her responses, Alexander watched the easy way his daughter, chatted with the nurse about her favorite breakfast cereals and why hospital gowns should come in better colors. "Mr. Park?" Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. "A word?" In the hallway, the doctor updated him on Sophie's condition. The swelling had decreased significantly, the transfusion had been successful, and they were optimistic about discharging her tomorrow if she continued to improve. There's something else, Martinez added, glancing at her tablet. The blood work we ran last night, the genetic markers are conclusive. Sophie is definitely your biological daughter. Even though he'd known it was true, hearing the medical confirmation made it real in a new way. I'd like a copy of those results. Of course, and Mr. Park. The doctor's expression softened slightly. Speaking as someone who's worked with children for 20 years, they're remarkably resilient. But they need stability. Whatever is happening between you and Ms. Carter, try to keep Sophie's well-being at the center of it. Alexander nodded, the advice hitting closer to home than he'd expected. Through the window, he could see Mia helping Sophie with her breakfast, both of them laughing at something. The scene stirred something profound in him, a sense of belonging he'd never known he was missing. His phone buzzed again. Richards, with increasingly desperate messages about the Winters deal falling apart. 8 years ago, that would have sent him running back to the office, priorities clear and unchangeable. Now he typed a different message. Deal's off. Find another buyer. When he returned to the room, Sophie was telling Mia about a dream she'd had, something about flying horses and ice cream clouds. She paused mid-story when she saw him. Alexander, will you stay and hear about the purple horse? He was my favorite part. The hope in her voice undid him completely. Yes, he said, pulling a chair closer to her bed. I'd love to hear about the purple horse. As Sophie launched into her tale, Alexander caught Mia's eye. Something passed between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. They both knew that everything had changed. The carefully ordered world Alexander had built, the protective barriers Mia had established. None of it could stand in the face of a 7-year-old girl who wanted to teach cartwheels to the father she'd just met. Outside the hospital window, New York continued its relentless pace. Deals were made and broken, fortunes rose and fell, empires expanded and crumbled. But in room 507 of Mount Sinai Hospital, Alexander Park was learning that some things mattered more than empire building. Some things were worth sacrificing everything for. He just hoped he wasn't 8 years too late to prove it. The discharge. Papers are ready, Ms. Carter. Dr. Martinez handed Mia a thick folder of documents. I've included care instructions for the stitches and signs to watch for regarding the concussion. Sophie should take it easy for at least a week. No school, no physical activities. Mia nodded, clutching the folder like a lifeline. I've already arranged to work from home. My boss was very understanding about the situation. I've also arranged for the best pediatric concussion specialist to monitor her recovery. Alexander interjected from where he stood, packing Sophie's few belongings into a hospital bag. He'd returned that morning in a fresh suit, looking every bit the powerful CEO despite having spent another night in the hospital room. Dr. Rebecca Chen, she'll do house calls. Mia's spine stiffened. We have a perfectly good pediatrician, Alexander, who isn't specialized in head trauma. His tone was measured but firm. Dr. Chen handles cases for professional athletes. She's the best in her field, and probably costs more per visit than I make in a month. Which isn't your concern? Alexander zipped the bag closed with finality. I'm her father. Her medical care is my responsibility now too. Before Mia could respond, Sophie emerged from the bathroom in her favorite purple dress, brought by Mia's friend Lucia the day before. Despite the bandage on her forehead and the lingering pallor in her cheeks, she was practically bouncing with excitement about going home. Can we get ice cream? She looked hopefully between her parents. The hospital ice cream was kind of weird. Alexander jumped at the opening. There's an excellent gelato place near Central Park. We could. Sophie needs rest. Mia cut in, firmly. Maybe another time. Sophie's face fell slightly, but she rallied quickly. Can Alexander come see our apartment? I want to show him my rock collection. I have 73 rocks and each one has a story. The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Mia felt trapped between her daughter's innocent request and the complexity of the situation. Sweetheart, Alexander probably has to. Get back to work, he's a very busy. Actually, Alexander interrupted smoothly. I've cleared my schedule for the next few days. I'd love to see your rock collection, Sophie. Alexander, Mia's voice carried a warning. A word outside. Please? In the hallway, Mia rounded on him, keeping her voice low but intense. You can't just invite yourself to our home. We need boundaries. Boundaries. Alexander's jaw tightened. She's my daughter, Mia. I've missed 8 years of rock collections and stories. I'm not missing anymore. You can't just walk into her life and take over. She barely knows you. Whose fault is that? The words came out sharper than he intended. He took a breath, modulating his tone. I have rights, Mia. Legal rights. My lawyer has already. Of course. Your lawyer. Mia laughed bitterly. Tell me, did you call him before or after you canceled that big deal you were working on? Alexander blinked, thrown off guard. How did you? The business news was playing in the hospital lobby this morning. Park Industries backs out of Winter's acquisition. Stocks plummet. She crossed her arms. Is this your new strategy? Torch your company to prove you've changed? I'm reorganizing my priorities. For how long? Mia's voice cracked slightly. Until the next big deal comes along? Until Sophie becomes inconvenient to your schedule? She's not a corporate takeover you can manage according to your timeline. Before Alexander could respond, Sophie appeared in the doorway, now in her coat, and ready to leave. Are you fighting? Her lower lip trembled slightly. Is it because of me? Both adults immediately shifted focus. No, sweetheart. Mia moved to her side. We're just discussing grown-up things. Very boring grown-up things, Alexander added, forcing a smile. Nothing for you to worry about. Sophie looked between them skeptically, displaying a perceptiveness that caught Alexander off guard. In my class, when Lily and Marcus fight, Ms. Henderson makes them sit in the friendship corner until they work it out. Despite everything, Mia had to suppress a smile. It's a little more complicated than that, baby. Why? Sophie's question was genuine. You're both nice people. You both like me. Why is it complicated? The innocence of her logic hit them, both hard. Alexander knelt down to Sophie's level, something he'd seen Mia do several times over the past 2 days. Sometimes grown-ups make things complicated because they're scared of getting hurt. But you're right, we both care about you very much. Sophie considered this, then declared with a child's certainty. Well, I think you should both come home and see my rocks. Then maybe you won't be scared anymore. Mia and Alexander exchanged glances over their daughter's head. In that moment, they both recognized a fundamental truth. Their own feelings, their past hurts, their complex adult emotions would have to take a backseat to Sophie's needs. Okay, Mia finally conceded. Alexander can come see the rocks, but just for a little while. You need to rest. The drive to Mia's apartment in the Upper West Side was quiet, tension simmering beneath forced pleasantries. Alexander had insisted on having his driver take them, and now sat across from Mia and Sophie in the spacious town car. He watched as Sophie pointed out landmarks along the way, her school, her favorite park, the library where she spent Saturday mornings. Each casual revelation was another reminder of all he'd missed. First steps, first words, first day of school, moments he could never get back. The thought made his chest tight with an unfamiliar emotion, regret. The apartment building was modest but well-maintained, with a doorman who greeted Sophie by name and fussed over her bandaged head. Inside, the apartment was smaller than Alexander's, walk-in closet but filled with warmth and personality. Children's artwork covered the fridge, books spilled from overcrowded shelves, and a thoroughly loved stuffed elephant held court on the couch. My rocks are in my room. Sophie tugged at Alexander's hand, pulling him down a short hallway. Come, see? As they disappeared into Sophie's room, Mia stood in the kitchen trying to process the surreal sight of Alexander Park, terror of Wall Street, notorious corporate raider, being led by the hand by a 7-year-old girl. She could hear Sophie's excited voice explaining the origin of each carefully collected stone, and Alexander's deeper tones asking thoughtful questions about their discoveries. Mia began mechanically unpacking Sophie's hospital bag, her mind racing. She'd spent 8 years building a life for them, protecting Sophie from the potential pain of rejection, Now Alexander was here, in their space, threatening to upend everything with his determination to be involved. The worst part was, she couldn't even hate him for it. The way he looked at Sophie, the genuine interest in her stories, the flash of pain in his eyes when he realized how much he'd missed, it was all real. The Alexander she'd known 8 years ago would have been incapable of such genuine emotion. "Mom," Sophie's voice carried from the bedroom. "Can Alexander stay for dinner? He's never had your special spaghetti." Mia closed her eyes, feeling the walls she'd built starting to crack. "Sophie, remember what Dr. Martinez said about rest, maybe another—" "I make excellent spaghetti too." Alexander appeared in the kitchen, Sophie still holding his hand. "Perhaps I could cook for both of you? To thank you for showing me your wonderful rock collection." Sophie's eyes lit up. "You can cook?" "When I want to." He smiled down at her. "It's like following a recipe for success, just with food instead of business deals." Mia recognized his strategy, using cooking as a way to extend his time with Sophie. Part of her wanted to refuse, to establish firm boundaries from the start. But Sophie was looking at them both with such hope, and after everything she'd been through. "1 hour," Mia conceded. "Then Sophie needs to rest." Alexander nodded, already rolling up his sleeves. "1 hour, I'll make it count." As he moved around their small kitchen with surprising competence, asking Sophie to be his special assistant while keeping her seated safely at the counter, Mia watched their interaction. The way he naturally adjusted his language to Sophie's level, his careful attention to her energy levels, the genuine joy in his expression at her every comment. This wasn't the Alexander she'd known. But then she wasn't the same Mia either. 8 years of single motherhood had changed her, made her stronger, more protective, more willing to fight for what mattered. The question was, were they both changed enough to find a way forward that wouldn't end up hurting Sophie? As the smell of garlic and herbs filled the apartment, and Sophie's delighted giggles mixed with Alexander's warm chuckle, Mia realized they had no choice but to try. For Sophie's sake, they would have to find a way to navigate this new reality, one pasta dinner at a time. Alexander's penthouse felt impossibly empty after leaving Mia's apartment. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of Manhattan's glittering skyline, but all he could see was Sophie's face lighting up as she'd tasted his spaghetti, declaring it almost as good as Mom's. His phone, which he'd been ignoring all evening, lit up again. This time it was Regina Bradford, the chairwoman of his board. He knew he couldn't avoid this call any longer. "Regina, do you have any idea what you've done?" Her voice was arctic. "The Winters deal was 3 months in the making. Their stock has plummeted and ours isn't far behind. The board is calling for an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." Alexander loosened his tie, pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch. "The deal wasn't right." "The deal was perfect," Regina snapped. "What isn't right is you going completely off the grid for 2 days, then torpedoing a multi-billion-dollar acquisition without any explanation. The Alexander Park I know would never—" "I have a daughter." The words came out before he could stop them, hanging in the air between them. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Regina spoke, her voice carefully controlled. "Explain." Alexander took a long sip of scotch, then told her everything. The accident at the lake discovering Sophie was his, the past 2 days at the hospital. As he spoke, he moved to his home office, where his laptop displayed the latest market reports. The numbers were as bad as Regina had suggested. "This changes nothing," Regina said when he finished. "Personal matters shouldn't interfere with business decisions. You've always understood that." "She's not a personal matter, Regina. She's my child. A child you didn't know existed until 2 days ago." Regina's tone softened slightly. "Alexander, I understand this is overwhelming, but you have responsibilities. Thousands of people depend on your leadership, their jobs, their futures." "I'm not stepping down," Alexander cut in. "But things will be different. I've already instructed Lawrence to begin custody proceedings." Dear God. Regina's exasperation was palpable. "Have you lost your mind?" A custody battle will be public. The press will have a field day. Corporate raider discovers secret love child. Can you imagine the headlines? Alexander's jaw tightened. I don't care about headlines. Well, you should. Because right now your shareholders care very much about why you're suddenly making irrational decisions. The board meeting is at 9 a.m. Be there, be focused, and be ready to explain how you're going to fix this mess. The call ended, leaving Alexander alone with his thoughts and the city lights. He pulled up his email, finding dozens of messages from his executive team, all variations on the same theme: damage control. His finger hovered over the keyboard, ready to fall back into familiar patterns, strategic responses, calculated moves, the corporate chess game he'd mastered years ago. Instead, he opened a new browser tab and typed, custody rights for fathers. Hours of research later, his scotch untouched, Alexander had filled pages of notes. Legal precedents, parental rights, custody arrangements. He approached it like any other challenge, methodically building his case. But this wasn't like his business deals. The stakes were infinitely higher. His phone buzzed with a text from Mia. Sophie asked for a goodnight story from you. I told her you were busy. Just thought you should know. The message hit him like a physical blow. He checked the time. 9:47 p.m. Too late now. Another moment missed. Another reminder of how much catching up he had to do. He typed back, I'm never too busy for her. Next time, please call. Mia's response came quickly. There are no guarantees of next time. That's something you need to understand. Before he could reply, she sent another message. She drew this for you at dinner. An image followed, a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures. A tall one in what appeared to be a suit, a smaller one with long hair, and a tiny one between them, holding both their hands. Above it, in Sophie's wobbly handwriting, my family. Alexander stared at the drawing until his vision blurred. He'd built his empire on being able to see 10 steps ahead, on calculating risks and returns, on never letting emotions cloud his judgment. But none of that prepared him for the impact of 3 simple stick figures. His intercom buzzed, security announcing that Richard Cole, his CFO, was on his way up. Alexander quickly saved Sophie's drawing to his phone, then straightened his time to face the first of many battles. Richard burst in without preamble, tablets and folders tucked under his arm. The numbers are worse than we thought. Winters is threatening to sue for breach of contract. Our major shareholders are demanding answers. Please tell me you have a plan. I always have a plan. Alexander moved to his desk, projecting his usual confidence. But first, I need you to understand something. My priorities have changed. Because of this child situation? Richard's expression was skeptical. Look, I get it. It's a shock. But surely we can handle it discreetly. A trust fund, maybe a quiet settlement with the mother. Her name is Sophie. Alexander's voice could have frozen hell. She's my daughter, not a situation to be handled. And her mother's name is Mia. Remember those names, Richard, because they're not going anywhere. Richard sank into a chair, looking shell-shocked. You're serious about this? Completely. Alexander pulled up the market projections. Now about Winters. They're overextended on their Pacific operations. That's why they pushed so hard. For this deal, we can use that. As they worked through the night, building strategies to contain the corporate fallout, Alexander kept Sophie's drawing open in another window. Every time the numbers threatened to overwhelm him, every time Richard suggested more practical solutions to the personal situation, Alexander looked at those 3 stick figures. For the first time in his career, failure wasn't an option, not because of pride or profit, but because a 7-year-old girl had drawn him holding her hand. She believed in the possibility of family, even if he hadn't earned that belief yet. Dawn was breaking when Richard finally left. Alexander stood at his window, watching the city come alive. In a few hours, he'd face his board. They'd demand explanations, guarantees, proof that he was still the ruthless leader they'd always counted on. His phone buzzed. Another message. From Mia. Sophie's asking if you can come see her rock collection again today. I told her you're probably busy with work. This time, Alexander didn't hesitate. He typed, I'll be there at 4. And Mia, thank you for letting me try. He could almost see her expression as she read his message, a mixture of hope and fear that probably matched his own. After a moment, she replied, Don't make promises you can't keep. She's not a business appointment you can reschedule. I know. He looked at the board meeting agenda on his desk, then added, I'll be there at 4. Some things are non-negotiable now. As his driver navigated morning traffic toward Park Industries headquarters, Alexander reviewed his notes for the board meeting. But between projections and damage control strategies, he'd written something else. 4 p.m., rock collection viewing with Sophie, priority, absolute. It was a small note, but it represented everything that had changed. The mighty Alexander, Park, who'd built an empire on never compromising, had finally found something he couldn't negotiate away. The question was, could he prove it to everyone else, especially Mia? The board meeting had been brutal. 3 hours of defending his decisions, outlining contingency plans, and reassuring increasingly skeptical board members. Alexander's usual commanding presence had kept outright rebellion at bay, but he could feel their confidence in him wavering. Just tell me you have a backup plan, Regina cornered him after the meeting. Another acquisition target, something to stabilize. The stock price. Alexander checked his watch. 3:15 p.m. He needed to leave soon to make it to Mia's by 4. The Williams Group is over-leveraged. Their tech division would fit our portfolio. I'll have the analysis on your desk tomorrow. Tomorrow? Regina's perfectly manicured nails drummed against her tablet. The Alexander Park I know would have it ready in an hour. The Alexander Park you know is evolving. He gathered his papers, already moving toward the door. I have a prior commitment. With your daughter? The word carried a weight of disapproval. Alexander, you need to think about this rationally. Children adapt. They're resilient. But the market is unforgiving. Alexander paused at the door. You know what's unforgiving, Regina? Missing your child's entire life because you were too focused on quarterly reports. I won't make that mistake again. The ride to Mia's apartment was tense, his phone constantly buzzing with crisis updates. A minor scandal had broken out. Someone had leaked news of the winter's deal collapse to the press. The stock was down another 3 points. His PR team wanted an emergency strategy session. Instead, Alexander found himself climbing the stairs to Mia's apartment at exactly 3:58 p.m., a carefully wrapped package under his arm. The door opened before he could knock. You came. Mia's surprise was evident, though she tried to hide it. I promised. He held up the package. Where's Sophie? Resting. The doctor visited this morning. She's still getting headaches. Mia's protective instinct flared. Maybe today isn't... Alexander. Sophie's voice carried from her room, followed by the sound of small feet padding down the hallway. She appeared in her favorite purple pajamas, her dark hair messy from napping. You really came. The joy in her voice made every battle of the day worth it. Of course I did. And I brought something for your collection. Sophie's eyes lit up at the package, but Mia interjected. Sophie, remember what Dr. Chen said about taking it easy. I feel much better, Mom. Sophie's pout was practiced perfection. Please, just for a little while? Alexander watched the internal struggle play across Mia's face. Finally, she sighed. Half an hour, then back to rest. Sophie led Alexander to her room, chattering about the new organization system she'd developed for her rocks while he was gone. The room was small but filled with personality, butterfly decals on the walls, books everywhere, and a meticulously arranged display of rocks on a shelf. Close your eyes, Sophie instructed as Alexander sat on the edge of her bed. He complied, feeling the package lifted from his hands. The sound of careful unwrapping followed, then a small gasp. You can... Look now. Alexander opened his eyes to find Sophie holding the specimen case with reverence. Inside, carefully arranged, were 5 unique mineral samples: a piece of rose quartz, an amethyst cluster, a tiger's eye, a peacock ore, and a small meteorite fragment. This one came from space? Sophie's finger traced the meteorite's display, carousel from a meteor shower over Arizona. Alexander watched her expression carefully. Each one has a story, like your collection. Sophie's face glowed with excitement but then fell slightly. But these are too special. They should be in a museum or something. They're exactly where they should be. Alexander's voice grew soft. With someone who will appreciate their stories. Sophie carefully placed the case on her shelf, then did something that stopped Alexander's heart. She hugged him. It was quick and spontaneous, her small arms barely reaching around his middle, but it shattered something inside him. "Thank you," she whispered. Then more hesitantly, "Can I ask you something? Anything? Are you—" Sophie fidgeted with her pajama sleeve. "Are you really my dad?" The question hung in the air like crystal, fragile and precious. Alexander took a careful breath. "Yes, I am. And I know I haven't been here before, but where were you?" The question wasn't accusatory, just genuinely curious. "Didn't you want to know me?" Alexander felt his carefully constructed corporate mask cracking. "I didn't know about you. If I had—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I made mistakes, Sophie. Big ones. But not knowing you has been the biggest mistake of my life." Sophie considered this with the gravity only a 7-year-old could muster. "Mom says everyone makes mistakes, that's how we learn. Your mom is very wise." Alexander smiled softly. "And very brave. She did an amazing job raising you all, by herself. She gets sad sometimes," Sophie confided. "When she thinks I'm sleeping, I hear her crying." The revelation hit Alexander like a physical blow. He thought of Mia, bearing the weight of single parenthood alone, crying in the dark while their daughter pretended to sleep. What kind of strength had that taken? "I have an idea," Sophie announced suddenly, moving to her desk. She returned, with paper and crayons. "We should make Mom a card, to make her happy." Alexander found himself sitting cross-legged on the floor with Sophie, helping her fold paper into a perfect heart shape. She insisted on drawing both of them together, holding a giant red heart between them. "You have to sign it too," she instructed, passing him a crayon. "Put love first, that's what Mom always says is most important." As Alexander carefully wrote "Love Alexander" below Sophie's exuberant signature, his phone buzzed. Regina again, probably with more market catastrophes. He silenced it without looking. "Sophie?" Mia appeared in the doorway. "Time to rest, sweetheart." "But we're not finished," Sophie protested, trying to hide the card. "We can finish it next time," Alexander promised, helping her up. "If that's okay with your mom?" Both Sophie and Alexander looked at Mia with such similar hopeful expressions that she had to suppress a smile. "We'll see how you're feeling tomorrow." After tucking Sophie in for her rest, Mia walked Alexander to the door. He could see the questions in her eyes, about his sudden appearance with expensive gifts, about his conversation with Sophie, about his promises of next time. "The minerals weren't too much?" he asked before she could speak. "They're perfect." Mia's voice softened. "She's been reading about geology." "How did you know?" "I didn't," Alexander admitted. "I just remembered how you used to collect seashells, how everyone had to have a story. I thought maybe Sophie had inherited that from me." Mia's smile was bittersweet. "She has your determination too. And your smile." Alexander's phone buzzed again. Multiple messages now. The world outside was demanding his attention. But for the first time in his career, he found himself wanting to ignore it all, to stay in this moment where Sophie's hug still lingered and Mia's smile held a hint of their old warmth. I meant what I said to her, he said quietly. About making mistakes, about wanting to be here now. I know. Mia's guard dropped slightly. I saw you silence your phone. The old Alexander would never have done that. The old Alexander was an idiot. Yes, Mia agreed, but her tone was gentle. But maybe the new one is learning. As Alexander rode back to his office, where crisis and chaos undoubtedly waited, he found himself remembering Sophie's words. Everyone makes mistakes. That's how we learn. He pulled out his phone, looking at the dozens of missed calls and messages. Then he opened his calendar and blocked off 4 p.m. every day for the next month, labeling it simply non-negotiable. The market would recover. The board would adapt. But Sophie's trust, Mia's guarded hope, those were fragile gifts he couldn't afford to waste. For the first time in his life, Alexander Park was learning that some investments weren't measured in dollars and cents, but in crayon hearts and spontaneous hugs. He just hoped he was learning fast enough. The headline screamed across the New York Times business section. Park Industries heir discovered. Corporate titan's secret child raises questions about leadership. Beneath it, a paparazzi photo showed Alexander leaving Mia's apartment building, and a school photo of Sophie clearly obtained without permission. Alexander's coffee cup shattered against his office wall. Find out who leaked this, he growled into his phone. I want them found today. Already working on it, Lawrence Chen, his lawyer, replied calmly. But Alexander, we need to discuss damage control. The press is digging. They found Mia's workplace, Sophie's school. An incoming call from Mia interrupted them. Handle it, Alexander snapped before switching lines. Mia, how dare you? Her voice trembled with fury. I just had 3 reporters ambush me outside Sophie's pediatrician's office. They were asking about child support, about our relationship, about... I'm handling it, Alexander cut in, already messaging his security team. Where are you now? In the car with Sophie. She's terrified, Alexander. They were taking pictures of her. She doesn't understand what's happening. The fear in Mia's voice cut through his anger. Go home. I'm sending security to your building. Don't talk to anyone. Security? Mia laughed bitterly. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your world crashing into ours, destroying everything we built. Mom? Sophie's voice came faintly through the phone. Why were those people taking pictures? Did I do something wrong? Alexander's heart clenched at the confusion in his daughter's voice. Let me talk to her. A moment of silence. Then Sophie's uncertain, hello? Hey, sweetheart. Alexander softened his voice. I'm sorry about those people. They're just very interested in boring grown-up stuff. You didn't do anything wrong. They said you're my dad, in the newspaper. Sophie's voice grew smaller. Everyone's going to know now. Is that okay? Alexander held his breath, realizing how much her answer meant to him. I don't know. Sophie paused. Will it change things? Will you stop coming to see my rocks? Never. The fierceness of his response surprised even him. Nothing could stop me from seeing you, Sophie. Nothing. Promise? I promise. Alexander looked at the newspaper on his desk, his resolve hardening. In fact, I have an idea. Put your mom back on. When Mia came back on the line, her voice was still tight with tension. Yes? Pack bags for both of you. My driver will pick you up in an hour. What? Alexander, we can't just... I have a house in the Berkshires. Private, secured, away, from the press. Sophie needs peace to recover, and you both need space from this circus. He waited a beat. Please, Mia. Let me protect our daughter. The words hung between them. Our daughter. Finally, Mia sighed. 1 hour? 1 hour. I'll meet you there tonight after I deal with this mess. After ending the call, Alexander turned to the wall of windows overlooking Manhattan. Already he could see photographers gathering outside the building. His phone buzzed constantly. Board members, shareholders, press wanting statements. Mr. Park? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. The board is requesting an emergency session, and Regina Bradford is here. Send her in. Regina swept into the office, brandishing a tablet. Have you seen the stock price? We're in free fall. The shareholders are panicking and this circus isn't helping. She thrust the tablet at him, showing more headlines. Park Industries, a dynasty built on secret, and corporate raiders love child scandal rocks Wall Street. It's not a scandal. Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. It's my family. Family? Regina's laugh was sharp. A child you didn't know existed until last week? A woman you haven't seen in 8 years? Be realistic, Alexander. We need to contain this. Contain what, exactly? He turned to face her fully. The fact that I have a daughter? That I'm taking responsibility for her? That I'm trying to be a father? The fact that you're letting emotions cloud your judgment. Regina slapped a folder on his desk. The Williams deal? Your analysis is half what it should be. Board meetings? You're checking your phone every 5 minutes. The Alexander Park who built this company would never. That Alexander Park is gone. He cut her off. And frankly, good riddance to him. Regina stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. You're serious about this? Completely. Alexander pulled up a document on his computer, which is why I've called for a shareholder. To remove you from the board. The color drained from Regina's face. You can't. I can, and I will. He turned the screen to show her. You've been working with the Winters Group behind my back, trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover while I was distracted by my personal life. How did you? I may be a father now, but I'm not blind. Alexander's smile was cold. Your mistake was assuming I couldn't be both. That caring about my daughter somehow made me weak. Regina straightened, recovering her composure. The board won't support this. The board already has. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Richard? His CFO entered immediately, carrying more folders. The votes are in. It's done. Regina looked between them, realization dawning. You planned this. I learned from the best. Alexander stood. You taught me that business is about anticipating threats, about protecting what matters. He walked to the door, opening it. Goodbye, Regina. After she left, Richard turned to him. The press is still waiting downstairs. What's our statement? Alexander looked at his watch. Mia and Sophie would be heading to the Berkshires now. Safe. Protected. Tell them the truth. Park Industries is entering a new era. One where family and business aren't mutually exclusive. And the shareholders? Show them the Williams analysis, the complete version, not what I gave Regina. Once they see we're acquiring their tech division at half what Winters would have cost us, they'll come around. Richard nodded, impressed. You played this perfectly. No. Alexander picked up his briefcase. I'm just finally playing for the right reasons. The drive to the Berkshires took longer than usual, traffic heavy with weekend travelers. Alexander used the time to make calls, set plans in motion, ensure every detail was handled. By the time he pulled up to the secluded estate, night had fallen. Light spilled from the windows, and through the glass he could see Sophie and Mia in the great room. Sophie was showing her mother something, probably rocks she'd found on the property, while Mia smiled, her guard finally lowered, in the privacy of their sanctuary. Alexander sat in his car for a moment, watching them. The empire he'd built, the power he'd accumulated, the victories he'd won. None of it compared to the simple sight of his daughter's animated gestures and Mia's gentle laugh. His phone buzzed one last time. Another headline. Park Industries announces major restructuring. CEO puts family first. Alexander smiled, turning off his phone. The business world could wait. Right now he had rocks to examine and a promise to keep. As he walked toward the house, Sophie spotted him through the window. Her face lit up as she waved, and even Mia's smile held a hint of welcome. The storm wasn't over. There would be more battles, more adjustments, more challenges to face. But for the first time in his life, Alexander Park wasn't fighting for profit or power. He was fighting for them. And that made all the difference. Morning mist clung to the Berkshire, hills wrapping the estate in a cocoon of privacy. Alexander stood on the wraparound porch, coffee in hand. watching Sophie explore the garden with the intense focus she brought to all her discoveries. She'd been up since dawn, determined to find special rocks in this new territory. "She's feeling better." Mia's voice came from behind him. "The headaches are almost gone." Alexander turned to find her offering a fresh cup of coffee. Their fingers brushed as he accepted it, sending a familiar spark through both of them. "Thank you. Not just for the coffee." "For what?" "For being here. For letting me be part of this." He gestured toward Sophie, who was carefully examining something in the flower bed. "I know it wasn't an easy decision." Mia leaned against the porch railing, her copper hair catching the morning light. "It wasn't a decision at all, really. You saw how scared she was yesterday with those reporters. I've never seen her like that." "Mom, Alexander!" Sophie's excited call interrupted them. "Come look what I found." They made their way down to the garden where Sophie stood proudly holding up a piece of quartz, its surface catching the sunlight. "It was hiding under the roses. Can we add it to the collection?" "Of course," Alexander smiled. "But first, how about breakfast? I was thinking we could try those blueberry pancakes you mentioned yesterday." Sophie's eyes lit up. "The ones with the special sauce? But Mom says they're complicated." "Well," Alexander rolled up his sleeves, "I happen to be very good at following instructions. Maybe your mom could teach me." He glanced at Mia, who tried to hide her surprise at this domestic version of Alexander Park, the man who could make billion-dollar deals but needed help with pancake recipes. "Please, Mom." Sophie added her own pleading look. "All right," Mia conceded. "But first go wash your hands. Garden treasures later, breakfast first." As Sophie rushed inside, Mia turned to Alexander. "You don't have to do this, you know. Play the perfect father. We both know you have a company to run." "I'm not playing anything." Alexander's voice was soft but firm. "And yes, I have a company, but I also have a daughter who thinks finding rocks in the garden is the most exciting thing in the world. I'm done missing these moments." Inside the massive kitchen, Sophie perched on a stool at the island, watching her parents navigate around each other. Alexander followed Mia's instructions with the same intensity he brought to corporate negotiations, measuring ingredients precisely while Sophie offered commentary on his technique. "You have to dance a little while you stir," she insisted. "That's what makes them special." "Dance?" Alexander looked genuinely puzzled. "Like this." Sophie demonstrated, swaying and humming. "Mom always does it." Alexander glanced at Mia, who was trying not to laugh. "I don't dance." "Everyone dances," Sophie stated with absolute certainty. "Right, Mom?" Mia's eyes met Alexander's over their daughter's head, remembering a different time, a charity gala 8 years ago when he'd surprised everyone by pulling her onto the dance floor. "Right. Everyone dances." To their amazement, Alexander Park, terror of Wall Street, began to sway slightly as he stirred the pancake batter. Sophie's delighted giggle was worth every bit of his damaged dignity. The morning passed in a bubble of domestic tranquility. After breakfast, Sophie convinced them both to help her create a proper display for her garden discoveries. Alexander found himself on the floor of the living room, helping to arrange rocks while Sophie explained her classification system. "The sparkly ones go here," she directed, "and the smooth ones there. It's very scientific." "Very scientific indeed," Alexander agreed solemnly, watching Mia hide a smile as she photographed their serious rock arrangement session. His phone buzzed. He'd turned it back on for emergency calls only. A text from Richard. "Press cooling. Down. Williams deal proceeding smoothly. Take the time you need." "Is it work?" Mia asked, noting his distraction. "You should check if it's important." "Nothing's more important than this." Alexander put the phone away. "Though, there is something we should discuss about Sophie's school." Mia tensed immediately. "What about it?" "The press attention will die down, but it won't disappear completely. I've had my security team evaluate several private schools with experience handling high-profile families." "No." Mia's voice was firm. She's not leaving her school. Her friends, her teachers, her whole life is there. Mom? Sophie looked up from her rocks. Is something wrong with my school? No, sweetheart, Mia assured her quickly. Everything's fine. Actually, Alexander interjected carefully, we're just talking about making sure you're safe and happy at school. Those people with cameras yesterday, we want to make sure that doesn't happen again. Sophie considered this, her small face serious. Can I still see Ms. Henderson? She's teaching us about butterflies next week. Alexander saw an opening. What if we made your current school safer? Better security, protocols for handling media. They'd need some upgrades, but... You want to renovate her entire school? Mia's eyebrows rose. I want our daughter to be safe without uprooting her life. Alexander met Mia's gaze steadily. I'm not trying to buy my way in, Mia. I'm trying to protect what you've built for her. The phrase, our daughter, hung between them, along with everything it implied. Sophie, oblivious to the undertones, continued arranging her rocks, humming the same tune they'd danced to while making pancakes. I'll think about it, Mia finally said. But no decisions without discussing it first. Both of us together. Both of us, Alexander agreed, the words feeling right in his mouth. Later that afternoon, as Sophie napped, still recovering from her injury, Alexander found Mia on the back terrace staring at the hills. Penny for your thoughts? She smiled slightly. Just remembering something Sophie said when she was younger. She used to tell stories about her dad, completely imagined ones, about how he was on a great adventure but someday he'd come back with treasures for her. Alexander's throat tightened. What kind of treasures? Rocks, usually, special, ones from faraway places. Mia turned to look at him. She's always been fascinated by them. I used to think it was random, but now... Now? Now I remember you collecting rocks on the beach in Maine. That weekend trip, when you were supposed to be closing the Davidson merger. The memory hit him hard. Playing hooky from work, spending hours combing the beach with Mia, finding perfectly smooth stones worn by the waves. It was the last, truly carefree moment before everything fell apart. I still have them, he admitted. In a box in my office, I never knew why I kept them. Mia's eyes softened. She's so much like you sometimes. The way she focuses completely on things that interest her. The little furrow between her brows when she's thinking hard. But she has your heart, Alexander said quietly. Your ability to find magic in ordinary things. Before Mia could respond, Sophie's voice called from inside. Mom? Alexander? Can we go look for more rocks before dinner? They shared a look, years of hurt and misunderstanding beginning to crack under the weight of their daughter's simple requests and genuine love. We're coming, sweetheart, Mia called back, then softer to Alexander. She's starting to trust that you'll be there when she calls. I will be. Alexander's voice was fierce with conviction. Every time. As they headed inside to join their daughter, both felt the shift in their dynamic. The past couldn't be erased, but perhaps it could be rebuilt. Like Sophie's careful rock arrangements, with each piece finding its proper place in a new configuration. The question was, were they ready to let it happen? The week in the Berkshires had passed like a dream, but reality couldn't be held at bay forever. Alexander stood in his home office in Manhattan, staring at the custody agreement Lawrence had drawn up. Joint custody, generous financial provisions, structured visitation schedules, everything perfectly arranged in precise legal language. Yet he couldn't bring himself to send it to Mia. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Park, your 2 p.m. is here. Send them in. Richard entered with several board members, their expressions grave. The Williams acquisition is complete, but we have another situation. Alexander gestured for them to sit, his mind still on the custody agreement. Go on. Winters is making moves, Richard explained. They're targeting our Asian operations, trying to poach our key executives there. They're offering significant incentives for anyone willing to jump ship. And? Alexander's tone made it clear he expected more. And, Richard continued carefully, They're spreading rumors about your commitment to the company's future, suggesting that your recent personal situation makes you a liability. They're using Sophie against you, board member Henderson added bluntly, painting you as distracted, emotional, unpredictable. Alexander's jaw tightened. Your point. We need a show of strength, Richard said. A clear message that nothing has changed. The Tokyo deal next week, you need to be there personally. 2 weeks minimum. No. Alexander's response was immediate. Alexander, be reasonable, Henderson pleaded. The Asian market is crucial. If we show weakness now. I said no. Alexander stood, moving to the window. Sophie's doctor is removing her stitches on Tuesday. She's returning to school next week. I promised to be there. For God's sake, Henderson exploded. She's 7 years old. She won't even remember if you miss. Get out. Alexander's voice could have frozen. Hell, all of you. After they left, Alexander pulled out his phone, finding the photo Mia had sent that morning. Sophie proudly displaying her rock museum in her room, now back in their apartment. The press had finally backed off, thanks to his legal team's aggressive response to any harassment. His phone rang. Mia. Hey, he answered softly. Sophie wants to know if you're still coming for dinner tonight. Mia's voice carried an undercurrent of tension. She's planning to show you her school project. I'll be there. Alexander looked at the stack of papers demanding his attention. Mia, we need to talk about the future. A pause. I know. Not just about custody arrangements. He took a deep breath. About everything. Later that evening, Alexander arrived at Mia's apartment to find Sophie waiting impatiently by the door. Finally, come see what I made. She dragged him to the kitchen table where a detailed diorama sat proudly displayed. It's the rock cycle. See, these are igneous rocks and these are metamorphic and… Sophie, Mia interrupted gently. Let's have dinner first. Then you can explain everything to Alexander. Over pasta, Sophie had insisted on Alexander's recipe. They maintained a facade of normalcy. But both adults felt the weight of unspoken words, of decisions that needed to be made. After dinner, Sophie launched into a detailed explanation of her project, her enthusiasm infectious. Alexander asked questions, genuinely fascinated by her understanding of geological processes. Mia watched them, her heart conflicted. Time for bed, sweetheart, she finally said. You have a big day tomorrow. But I'm not finished explaining, Sophie protested. How about this? Alexander suggested. I'll come by tomorrow after work and you can tell me more? Sophie's face fell. You promised to come to my doctor appointment tomorrow. The hurt in her voice cut through him. And I will. I meant after that. Promise? I promise. He met Mia's eyes over Sophie's head. Some things are non-negotiable. After Sophie was tucked in, Mia and Alexander sat in the living room, the weight of their discussion hanging between them. They want you in Tokyo, Mia said, not a question. Alexander wasn't surprised she'd heard. Yes. For how long? 2 weeks, minimum. He leaned forward. I'm not going. Alexander, no. He cut her off. I've spent 8 years missing everything. Her first steps, first words, first day of school. I won't miss her getting these stitches out. I won't miss her presentation about rocks. I won't miss any of it anymore. Your company can survive without me for a while. He stood, pacing. Or maybe it can't. Maybe Winters will succeed in their takeover. Maybe I'll lose everything I've built. You don't mean that. Don't I? He turned to face her. 8 years ago, I chose the company over everything else. Over us. I told myself it was the right decision, that sacrifice was necessary for success. His voice cracked slightly. I was wrong, Mia. So wrong. Mia stood too, moved by the raw emotion in his voice. Alexander, no one is asking you to choose. The world is always asking us to choose, he interrupted. Every day, every moment. And I'm choosing her. I'm choosing this. He gestured to encompass the apartment, their family dinner, Sophie's project on the table. I'm choosing us. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. There is no us, Mia said softly, but her voice wavered. Isn't there? Alexander stepped closer. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me you don't see how right this could be. It's not that simple. It is. He reached for her hand and she didn't pull away. I love her, Mia. More than I thought possible. And I never stopped loving you. Mia's breath caught. Alexander. I know I hurt you, he continued. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But Sophie deserves a real family, not just scheduled visitations and custody arrangements. She has a real family, Mia whispered. She has me. Yes, she does. Alexander's voice was fierce with admiration. You've been everything she needed. You're an amazing mother, Mia. But maybe she could have both of us. Really have us. Before Mia could respond, Sophie's voice came from the hallway. Mom? Alexander? They turned to find her standing there in her pajamas, looking small and vulnerable. What's wrong, baby? Mia asked, moving toward her. I had a bad dream. Sophie's lower lip trembled. About the people with cameras. They were trying to take me away. Alexander reached her first, kneeling down to her level. No one will ever take you away, Sophie. I promise. Can you both stay? She looked between them pleadingly. Just until I fall asleep? Mia and Alexander exchanged glances, years of hurt and hope passing between them in a moment. Of course, sweetheart, Mia said softly. As they sat on either side of Sophie's bed, watching her drift back to sleep, Alexander reached across the space between them. After a long moment, Mia's hand found his. Outside New York continued its endless rhythm. Deals were made and broken. Fortunes rose and fell. But in a small apartment on the Upper West Side, 3 people teetered on the edge of becoming something. More than just connected by circumstance, they were on the verge of becoming a family. The question was, were they all ready to take that leap? 3 months later, Central Park bloomed with early summer flowers. Alexander stood at the edge of the lake where everything had changed, watching Sophie carefully examine the rocks along the shore. She stayed well back from the water's edge, a lingering caution from her accident, but her enthusiasm remained undimmed. This one has tiny crystals, she announced, holding up her latest discovery. Do you think it's quartz? Let's check. Alexander knelt beside her, pulling out the small magnifying glass they now carried on their rock hunting expeditions. See how it catches the light? Like stars. Sophie's face lit up. Can we add it to the special collection? The special collection now occupied a custom-built display case in Alexander's penthouse, a permanent home for Sophie's most precious discoveries. Next to it stood a smaller case containing those beach rocks from Maine, finally liberated from their box in his office. Of course, he carefully wrapped the rock in tissue paper, tucking it into his pocket. But first, we have somewhere important to be. Sophie's eyes widened. Is it time? Almost. He checked his watch, 2:45 p.m. We should head over. They walked hand in hand through the park, Sophie chattering about her plans for the rocks display. The press had long since lost interest in photographing them, allowing these moments of normal father-daughter interaction that Alexander treasured more than any business victory. Park Industries had survived his reshuffled priorities. The Tokyo deal had been handled remotely, with Richard taking point on the ground while Alexander managed strategic decisions from New York. They'd lost some ground in Asia, but gained unexpected support from investors who appreciated the human element of their CEO's story. More importantly, Alexander hadn't missed a single one of Sophie's doctor appointments, school presentations, or rock-collecting expeditions. They reached their destination, the Cherry Hill Fountain, right on time. Sophie immediately spotted Mia waiting for them, rushing forward for a hug. Did you find any good ones? Mia asked, smoothing Sophie's hair. Alexander says this one has star crystals. Sophie pulled the wrapped rock from Alexander's pocket. Can we put it next to the meteorite? We'll find the perfect spot, Mia promised, sharing a smile with Alexander over their daughter's head. The past 3 months had been a careful dance of rebuilding trust. Family dinners had become regular events, sometimes at Mia's apartment, sometimes at Alexander's penthouse. Sophie's rock collection migrated between both places, creating a tangible connection between her two homes. But today was different. Today would change everything. Ready? Alexander asked softly. Mia nodded, taking Sophie's other hand. Together, they walked to the fountain where a small group waited: Richard, Lucia, and Judge Martinez, who had agreed to perform the ceremony. Privately. Today? Sophie whispered, realization dawning. Really today? Really today, Mia confirmed, squeezing her hand. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Judge Martinez spoke about family, about love that grows stronger through challenges, about second chances earned through genuine change. Sophie stood between her parents, holding their hands, practically vibrating with excitement. When it came time for the vows, Alexander turned to Mia, his carefully prepared speech forgotten in the face of her radiant smile. 8 years ago, I thought I knew what mattered, he said simply. I was wrong. You and Sophie, you're everything that matters. You're my true north, my home, my heart. I promise to spend every day proving worthy of this second chance. Mia's eyes shimmered with tears as she responded. 8 years ago, I thought I had to protect Sophie from your world. I was wrong too. She needed both of us together. We all did. I promise to trust in us, in this family we're building, in the love that brought us back together. And I promise to keep teaching you about rocks, Sophie added solemnly, drawing laughs from everyone present. When Judge Martinez pronounced them husband and wife, Sophie was the first to cheer. Alexander kissed Mia softly, years of separation dissolving in the sweetness of reunion. Does this mean we're a real family now? Sophie asked, hugging them both. We've always been a real family, sweetheart, Mia assured her. This just makes it official. And it means, Alexander added, that we have a surprise for you. They walked to where his driver waited, then drove to the Upper West Side. But instead of turning toward Mia's apartment or his penthouse, they stopped at a beautiful brownstone. What's this? Sophie asked as they climbed the steps. Home, Alexander answered, unlocking the door. If you both like it. The house was everything they'd discussed, spacious enough for Sophie's growing rock collection, close to her school, with a garden for new discoveries. Mia gasped at the library filled with geology books while Sophie ran from room to room in delight. Your room has a special surprise, Alexander told her, leading the way upstairs. The walls of Sophie's room were lined with custom-built display, cases each perfectly lit to showcase mineral specimens. But the centerpiece was a familiar piece of quartz in a special case of its own, the first rock she'd ever shown him. It's perfect, Sophie breathed, then turned to them with sudden concern. But what about the rocks at your other places? We'll bring them all here, Mia assured her. This is home now, all of us, together. Later that evening, after Sophie had finally fallen asleep in her new room, Alexander and Mia stood in their garden. The Manhattan sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. Having regrets? Alexander asked softly, holding her close. About the house? The wedding? Or you giving up the Tokyo expansion to be here? Any of it. All of it. Mia turned, in his arms, looking up at him. Do you remember what Sophie said about her rocks, how each one has a story? Of course. That's us. Our story had rough edges, dark moments, times when we were broken. But look what it became. She touched his face gently. Something precious, something worth keeping. From upstairs came Sophie's voice. Mom? Dad? I found another special rock in the garden. They shared a laugh. Their daughter's enthusiasm was unstoppable, even at bedtime. We're coming, sweetheart, Alexander called back, taking Mia's hand. As they climbed the stairs together, he realized that Sophie had been right all along. Everyone makes mistakes, that's how we learn. His mistakes had cost him 8 years with his family, but they'd also taught him what truly mattered. Love wasn't about perfect moments or flawless choices. It was about finding your way back home, about building something stronger from broken pieces. Like Sophie's beloved rocks transformed by time and pressure into something beautiful, they were transformed too. All of them. No longer separate pieces, but a family, shaped by challenges into something precious and unbreakable. And that was the greatest discovery of all. If you had to choose between building an empire or rebuilding a family, what price would you be willing to pay? Alexander had to almost lose everything to realize what really mattered. Have you ever stopped to think about what is truly non-negotiable in your life? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.